What's a negative? If you're the president of the United States, are you going to impose tariffs or not? Make it a call. Are we imposing tariffs or no? Amy says yes. Why would it be a good thing, Amy?
So that we can have the U.S. businesses.
Okay. Why might it be a bad thing? Okay, not as much money. But now the other argument could be if you're the worker at Metal Industries or Right Screen and you're keeping your job because you're selling doors, maybe you have money to support those other businesses. So maybe that worker over there would have money to go buy the chocolate, the movie, and don't forget the roses. Okay. It really is. It might be a little hard to understand, but on top of it, it's a little hard to make a decision here. Which way is right? Okay. But when you have other countries that don't pay their workers as much, that's why this becomes a big discussion, really. Okay. And however you feel about it, you definitely understand there's a lot of different angles here. Okay, so economic differences between the North and the South. Definitely want you to think of the North as manufacturing, mentioned that yesterday. And in the South, one thing I did add there, note that word agrarianism. Please do note that word. Okay, the South were and was agrarian. And that's where farmers are considered to have most power. Okay, agrarian. All right, on we go. So, tariffs in a lot of cases become what are called protective tariffs. Okay, protective tariffs. All right, so let's read through this. The tariff. What's a protective tariff? It's a tax on imported. Now, don't forget one thing that I was a little short on there. I want to also mention that it's also a tax on exports. Okay, so it does impose a tax on some exports too. Now, you can have a selective tariff where you don't necessarily tax everything. Okay, so why do we do it? Okay, Aiden, let's read through that.
The tariff. What is a protective tariff? Tax on imported and exported goods. Why? It generates money for the government. It is easy to collect and it will raise the price of imports so people will buy the American-made product. What is the negative result of the tariff?
Okay, and then after all our discussion, what's the negative result of the tariff?
The other prices or people or other businesses might not be able to stay open because they aren't making as much money.
Okay. And keep in mind also there, simply put, the negative result is the buyer just has to pay more. And then yes, as a consequence of that, as Aiden said, you might not have as much money to spend elsewhere. Okay. So you want to think this through. Now again, very controversial. It's been ever since Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury. Okay. So the buyer has to pay more, and you might have less money to spend on other businesses. Okay, now however you feel about it, obviously in just a 10-15 minute explanation, I don't expect you to be experts on this and be able to set financial policy. However, I want you to understand how it works. Okay? Negative outcome of the tariff, buyers to pay more, and you may have less money then to spend on other things. So it may hurt other businesses. All right. Now, getting back to this, sectionalism. What is sectionalism? I mentioned that last chapter. We saw this alive and well. What's sectionalism? Anybody remember? What's sectionalism? Look at the word itself. You might be able to figure it out. What's sectionalism? Jesse, what do you think sectionalism is?
Like dividing the country.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Sectionalism. So which part of the country was hurt the most by tariffs? Which part of the country was hurt the most? What do you think? Aiden?
South.
The South was actually hurt the most. because the South had imported most of its goods. So the South was really hurt by the tariffs. The South imports most of its goods, so the South would be hurt. Here we see some division between North and South again, don't we? Okay, Hamilton's second plan, assumption. Assumption. You make an assumption. That means you take something on. Well, I'm going to make this, I'm going to make it real simple. Okay? Assumption is when, real simple, when the federal government pays the debts of the states. The federal government takes on the debts of the states and pays them off. Now, right off the bat, I hope you're thinking this could be very controversial because not all the states had money. Virginia did, Pennsylvania did, so did New York, but that was really where it stopped. So you're a taxpayer in Pennsylvania. Why are you paying the debts for Georgia? A whole different meaning here, people. Hamilton believed that it would add credit to the federal government, and make sure you underline that word credit. Hamilton believed it would add credit to the federal government. He thought this was important, that we better add credit. So if people depend on the federal government, it's going to increase the credit. So the federal government's acting like a banker here is what's going on. This was also very controversial. Okay, because what happened is a lot of people bought bonds. Does anybody know how a savings bond works? You buy a bond. Anybody know how it works? You buy a bond for a certain amount, let's say $25. When it matures, it's worth $50, although they keep accruing interest afterwards. Okay? What happened is people bought bonds to help pay for the war. So they give you $25. So you're the federal government, you get $25. You fight your war. But then what happens? As any math class would teach you, or any consumer math class would teach you, what happens when the war is over? Go ahead. Well, and what happens to the person that bought the bond? Yeah, big time. And they want their money. Well, the states say, uh-oh, we don't have it. Gracie, would you ever do that? Someone gives you $25 expecting $50 back and you spend that $25. Then what happens when Jesse says, Gracie, I want my money plus interest? You're like, oh no, aren't you? I don't know, what'd you do? Did you buy roses or something maybe? But anyway, so you get the idea here. So simply put, the states didn't have the money. So Hamilton says, well, let's bail out the states and everybody depends on the federal government. That plays right into Hamilton's mission. Hamilton is a federalist. Remember, federalists want a strong federal government. People depend on the federal government. Everybody's happy. Okay? So, assumption. This is what had to be assumed. The big one was the war bonds. And I want you to know how they work. Bonds. You buy for a certain amount, and then when they mature, you have to pay them back, obviously. A lot of people will tell you bonds are very safe investments today. It could very well be. Financial planners have different opinions there, but they are safe. It's not like investing in stocks that can crash. Problem is, if you get lower interest and the cost of living and inflation goes up, then you actually lose money. Okay, you also had to pay France, Spain, and the Netherlands debts. Just round that off and make that $12 million. And the bottom line is there was a debt of about $52 million. That's what you want to know. The debts of the states, $52 million. Not a problem. $52 million, which today is not a whole lot of money. Don't get me wrong, I gladly take. So you're looking at about $52 million. Okay? Take a look at this. We'll move on. Look at this quote of Hamilton. Aiden, read that, please.
The national debt, if it is not excessive, will be to us a national blessing.
What's Hamilton saying here? Gracie.
If the country doesn't get in a lot of debt, then that would be like very good. So then you won't have to pay back all that money.
Okay, good. Maggie.
If you have a debt, like a national debt, and obviously if it's not too big, it'll like bring the states together because they all have everything.
Okay, yes, all the states need money. Amy.
I was thinking if you have some debt, then hopefully you're working to pay off the debt, and if it's not that much, then it'll be easier to pay off.
Yeah, and I agree with all those answers. The bottom line is, here's the word I want you to think of, depend. Hamilton was happy because the states would depend on the federal government. The states would depend on the federal government to pay the debts, to provide armies, etc. Now, I also want you to understand something here. There's big opposition to Hamilton by a man named Jefferson, which is where political parties are going to start. And Jefferson's going to say, no, we don't want depending on the federal government. Let the people alone. Let the states do their thing. But depending on the federal government is wrong too. So there's two schools of thought here. Okay? Hamilton doesn't need to act like the parent here, and the states are the child. So I want you to understand that point too, and that's what Jefferson was saying. We don't need to depend on the federal government. But obviously, Alexander Hamilton was by far the dominant figure in Washington's administration. It's not that Washington wasn't in favor of what Hamilton was doing, but a lot of things he did, I'm sure, made Washington say, well, gee, you kind of went a little far there. I'll support you, but while he was gritting his teeth, fake as though they were. That was bad. I'm sorry. Okay. Moving right along there. Hamilton, so second plan is to assumption. Why would this be good? Why is it good to assume the debts of the states? Why is that good? Maggie, why is that a good thing?
Well, it can like bring the states together and like work for a common goal, and then also people might be less upset with the states for not paying them back.
Okay. Why would it be a bad thing then? Why would it be a bad thing to assume the debts of the state? Go ahead.
Because the states wouldn't want to pay other states' debts.
Okay. Today we're immune to that. You pay your federal income taxes or your federal taxes, whatever you pay. Do you know that less than 1% of what you pay actually goes for a good or service that you actually benefit from? That you actually, I shouldn't say benefit, that's the wrong word, but that you actually partake of? Your money could easily go for a road down in Southern California that you'll never drive on, is what I'm saying. Back then, that would have never happened. Today, we just pay it. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I just want you to understand that. Okay, so on we go. Hamilton wishes to assume, buy back these war bonds. These are the debts I'm talking about, okay? B. Hamilton, go ahead.
The federal government has no authority to bail out the states and assume its debts, even if it means people go bankrupt. The Constitution does not allow it.
And who's that guy saying that? Good.
Jefferson?
That's not Jefferson. Try again. Nobody wants to try. That's not Jefferson. Jefferson had red hair. That's not him. Try again. Go. We got 5 minutes. Go. Help, Gracie. But it's not Hamilton. That's Hamilton. That's Madison. So what you understand, Madison is against this. Madison is against this. Okay? Madison and Jefferson were against it. They oppose national debt and are highly against paying war bonds at full face value. They say, no, we're not going to do this because they don't want depending on the federal government. Jefferson was all about enumerated powers. You do what's in the Constitution. That's it. And this was not in the Constitution. Although Jefferson really contradicted himself when he bought Louisiana because that wasn't in the Constitution either. You ever hear that phrase, do as I say, not as I do? Okay. Summary here. Amy, go ahead, please.
Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, initially proposed the National Bank, called the First Bank of the United States, to reduce the debt from the Revolutionary War and stabilize the nation's currency. Jefferson and Madison insisted that it violated the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, which stated that any powers the Constitution did not specifically give Congress remained with the people. Hamilton also cited the 10th Amendment in the bank's defense, saying the amendment implied the government's right to establish a national bank because it was for the common.
You see the argument here. So here we go. Under a conviction that such a relation subsists, the Secretary of Treasury will, with all deference, conceives that it will result as a necessary consequence from the position that all specified powers of the government are sovereign as to the proper objects that the incorporation of a bank is a constitutional measure. Boy, did somebody really twist the words there to get this, didn't they? It's kind of like that example I gave you last week about implied powers or enumerated powers, where a student I was talking to got grounded because he's not allowed to drive the car anymore. So he borrowed his friend's car. Well, he didn't say I can't drive my friend's car. He just said I can't drive our car. Yeah, I don't know. Now, don't go doing that, please. Okay? So, amendment, or the third part there of Hamilton's plan, you want to know the National Bank is created. Okay, the third plan. So you need to know the three: tariffs, assumption, and the creation of a national bank. Why does Hamilton want this? This is one of the reasons why he's on the $10 bill, by the way. Let's read through that. Jesse, if you would, please.
Hamilton's plan. Hamilton supported the creation of the National Bank. Wanted a national bank intended purpose: manage debt, issue paper money. Hamilton believed providing a national currency would promote trade, encourage investment, and stimulate economic growth. However, Madison, Jefferson, and other Southerners disagreed with the National Bank bill and were highly against it.
I want you to know Madison and Jefferson are against it. And this whole debate is going to lead to political parties. I want you to know that. Political parties actually start because of a debate between Jefferson and Hamilton, not Washington. Okay? Washington did not belong to any party, although if you had to label him something, you would say he was a Federalist. He would not have liked that, though. Because he'd have said, nope, I'm neither. His policies tended to be Federalist, though. Okay? So the Bank of the U.S., it's not in the enumerated powers. Okay, let's get this yet. Jesse, if you would, please.
Not in the Fed's enumerated powers. Hamilton stresses that Article 1, Section 8 says the federal government has the power to make all laws which are necessary and proper to the safety and security of the United States. This establishes implied powers. Congress passes the bill and Washington signs it.
Now, you want to know that. Implied powers. Okay, last thing for today, but very important. What are implied powers? What do you think that means? Implied powers. Go ahead.
Like powers that you kind of just like you should like get what they're trying to say, but I don't know. Because when it's implied, like just get what it means. I don't know.
But they're not specifically written.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. And I see where you were going with that. Implied powers are powers not specifically written down. Okay, but assumed that you have them. Okay, more tomorrow. 3 plans for Hamilton.